guys, so this is a quick revision series of just about 7 minutes. Okay, so we'll be discussing on chronic subdural hematomas. The first heading would be the etiology. So the etiology it's divided into a younger age group and the older age group. The younger age group, most common cause is road traffic accidents. The elderly age group, as most of you know, it's a trivial fall. So fall from standing height is how it's described. Coming to the pathogenesis, now this is very important. So what you can see is the skull, the meninges and the brain. And the most important layer is called the dural border cell layer. Now, why is this important? There are normally veins that run from the cortical surfaces to the dural venous sinuses. These veins are usually thinned out at this point, and this layer essentially it has weak extracellular matrix. So it forms a natural cleavage plane, and whenever there is any kind of force that pulls the brain away from the dura and the skull, this is where the veins rupture, and this is where the bleeding occurs in the dural border cell layer. And this is what eventually forms a chronic subdural hematoma. Now, the next important thing you need to know is the pathology of how this subdural hematoma, once it's formed, how does it expand and how does it lead to a chronic subdural. So again, what you can see on the screen in front of you is there is an outer membrane and an inner membrane. The outer membrane consists of fibroblasts, myofibroblasts, smooth muscle cells and a lot of inflammatory cells. Now this can be up to 1 centimeter in thickness, and this is the membrane that usually secretes the fluid into the cavity of the subdural hematoma. The inner membrane is relatively avascular, okay, and it's usually adherent. We don't usually tamper with this membrane during surgery. The next important thing is the expansion of the subdural. So there are two theories for expansion. As you can see, there is one theory of recurrent hemorrhagings into the cavity. So there is bleed and then there's rebleed. This is what eventually forms that subdural hematoma. The second theory is that of Gardner. Okay, this is called a osmotic or oncotic pressure theory. This basically states that whatever fluid is secreted inside has a oncotic pressure and it sucks in more fluid, and that's how the subdural hematoma grows. Next important heading, CT classification. So chronic subdural hematomas, as with any hemorrhage, CT is the preferred modality, not MRI. Now in the CT classification, there are 4 stages. Okay, one is the homogeneous type of subdural, one is the laminar type, one is the layered type, and one is the multilocular type or a trabecular type. Now this is important because this essentially prognosticates and this essentially tells you which subdurals are going to be growing, which subdurals are going to recur and which not. So the layered variety is the one that has the highest chance of recurrence and growth, and the multilocular and the trabeculated variety essentially means that it's fibrosis has set in and it's in the older stage, so these have lesser chances of recurrence or growth. The clinical presentation, most of the subdurals are in the elderly. Most of them are well preserved. So 80% of subdurals will have a GCS score of say 13 to 15, and only about 20% will have a really grossly deranged Glasgow Coma score. Now, chronic subdural hematomas were described as the great neurological mimic. Okay, so they can essentially mimic anything. You can have memory disturbances, you can have limb weakness, you can have confusion. The Mark-Walder prognostication score is a score from 0 to 4 and essentially based on the clinical condition of the patient. Okay, you can see this on the screen in front of you. So stage 0, neurologically normal. Stage 1, alert and oriented with mild symptoms or mild signs. Grade 2, patient is drowsy or disoriented and with moderate signs, so there is an obvious hemiparesis. Grade 3, patient is stuporous, M4 or M5 in GCS, responds only to pain. And grade 4, the patient is deeply comatose with no motor response or a decerebrate or decorticate response. So that's GCS of M1, M2 or M3. Okay, now the treatment of chronic subdural hematomas, the medical management and the surgical management. So when do we opt for surgery? Typically when there are moderate symptoms, okay, when there is very obvious pressure on the brain, either unilaterally or bilaterally. Medical management is essentially involves whatever, if there is a coagulopathy, if there is antiplatelet therapy going on, you need to stop that. Steroids haven't been shown to be very efficacious. Now, theoretically, steroids should decrease inflammation, and according to the rebleed theory, steroids should decrease the subdural, but this has not been shown in studies. Tranexamic acid is something that's promising. Okay, it essentially inhibits the activation of plasminogen to plasmin, and this is what breaks the cycle of the bleed and the rebleed and prevents a subdural hematoma from growing. Surgery is essentially divided into three. Okay, you have either the twist drill craniostomy, you have the burr hole and evacuation of subdural, or you have a mini craniotomy and evacuation of subdural. Now, this varies largely from surgeon to surgeon. Most of us around the world, we do a burr hole. So if it's a chronic subdural, you do one burr hole on the site of maximum thickness of the subdural. If required, you can place another burr hole just anterior to the coronal suture and flush fluid from one end, drain it from the other end. And again, leaving a drain or no depends. Most of us leave a drain if the brain doesn't come up to the surface. And that's about it.